Yeah, what comes to mind is that there, Qigong, in essence, is equivalent to the biopsychology part because we're looking at the mind and how it helps the emotions and gives that foundational energy at the lower dantian, which branches out into all parts of the body. On that level, when you go into Neigong, Neigong is more the alchemical process and transmuting into a more enlightened state. However, I feel that the two can merge and often do. That it's not just about the body. We become, one can become very body-centric and maybe even get stuck there because you're in survival mode, for instance. And the lesser mind, which turns to greed and selfishness, can overtake the higher consciousness, and then you're just kind of stuck in the body, not evolving as you could. I won't say should, but there's that potential in every human being that if they understand our connection to the bigger picture, the macrocosm. So we talk about the microcosm, which is within the body, but the macrocosm is our connection as human beings relating to our environment, relating to the earth that's below us, relating to the sky that gives us the air and the weather, and these two merging, into together, really through us. It is around us, and yet it goes through us. And when we can appreciate this interrelationship, this this understanding of how we support each other rather than how we destroy each other, especially these days, there is a more sensible, you could say, way of using our practices to access this higher consciousness so that we can be better human beings. And so that's my thought on that, David. I see how the chakra system, because you say there's more than three, I find that interesting because when I teach women especially, I talk about the throat dantian. It's not an official part of the dantians that the Chinese acknowledge, that the Taoists acknowledge per se. But I've often thought that in order for women to really find their alignment, that they need to access their voice and their vocal expression, because that voice is often being repressed. And so to find the way in through meditation or Qigong practice is a way for us to communicate better and be heard and be seen. And then once we have that, we are able to better connect with the outside world around us, whether it's a family member or our plant medicine that you have, David, and all the people that are connected with us. We have to start there first. So that these are some of the thoughts, because you have so much ancient knowledge, and I would love to hear more about how you context your teachings in this environment of floating between the Taoists and the Hindu system, the ancient Tibetan systems, and the cultures that have, you've become a funnel. You have become a funnel for this information to be shared and transmuted by supporting others on that journey as well.
Well, I think the only thing that I really have a lot of is curiosity. And you
Great.
said some things that have made me very curious. So you mentioned the throat chakra, and you defined it in a certain way that also parallels the classical Hindu and Buddhist Tantra of the function of the throat chakra as being expression. And that has carried over into our contemporary biopsychology system as well. Okay, but in the older systems, we also find some very interesting links with not just the throat chakra as a place of expression, but the throat chakra as being linked very much to the dream state. And like the throat chakra is the center of activating lucid dreaming in the Tibetan tradition. But there was also something that you said that I think is important to go back to, and that is that you said that in different traditions, in one tradition, there is a throat chakra, and then in another tradition, there is not a throat chakra. Now, that points to something very fundamental about the nature of the chakras and the Dantian and this subject that we're talking about of this inner landscape, which is a very subjective experience. And we find also the same thing in the classical Hindu and Buddhist tantras, which is one of the most common questions that comes in talking about this. People will say, how many chakras are there? I have heard there are 7. And then somebody else will say, I've heard there's 8. And then somebody else will say, I've heard there's 12. Okay. And if you look at the subject historically, what you find is that even in one period of time, say in Hindu Tantra only, well, that's a vast period of time. That's 1,000 years in many different places in India. And according to different lineages, there's different descriptions of how many chakras there are, okay? And a lot of times they kind of overlap, like in certain Tibetan traditions, the 6th and 7th are kind of the same thing, or the 1st and 2nd are kind of the same thing.
Right.
So this points to a real important aspect of the chakras and the Dantian is that there is no consensus about these details because there's nothing to find. Okay, we all agree that we have one liver, but we can't find out exactly how many chakras we have. And this, I think, is a very fundamental reason to study the chakras. And you articulated it just now. And that is that the chakras may or may not have correlations in different lineages. Or we may or may not be able to find correlations with body centers or endocrine glands or whatever. But that was not their original intention. Anyway, the original intention was that these were places to do internal practice.
Okay.
Okay.
So did they, the 3 systems that you speak of, they all did it differently then in terms of how they used their practice to manifest either physical health or spiritual health? Is that true?
There's a great diversity in the descriptions of the chakras. There is one universal function.
Okay.
And that's also in the Dantian. You've already touched on it. And it's in all the systems. And that is that there is enlightenment, illumination. And it is represented metaphorically as a higher state of consciousness, even though we could also say it's a more internal or deeper, quieter state. But it's represented as higher, and it's also represented as being more associated with our brain and upper body as opposed to, our base of our spine or the reproductive organs. And so therefore, we see that the shared commonality in all the practices is to move the center of our focus, to move the center of our existence to move the center of our attention and our energy out of matter into spirit, out of earth at the root chakra. This is using the symbology now of the Hindu and Buddhist Tantra. Move it from the earth element to the water element to the fire element to the air element to the space element. And that's the 5 chakras into what would be called in Taoism, returning to the Tao.
Right.
So that's what appears to be the most fundamental shared purpose of these chakras. Okay. And that is something that I think is not appreciated enough in contemporary studies, because really, if we look at these traditions, they were not about like, let's unblock our chakras so that we can, deal with our biopsychology. That is healing. That is increased well-being. That is absolutely the side effect of doing these practices. But I don't think, and this is my own opinion about it from reading about the lives of people who practice very, very deeply, I don't think they were really concerned about this. I think what they were really going for was complete transcendence. I think they were literally going for enlightenment. And if we are to look at the shared commonality of all of the systems, the older systems, they all teach how to create a strongly altered state of physiology, to create samadhi, to create a deep, prolonged, very blissful meditative state